Once you have finished recording a chapter, the next thing you need to do, if you're proofing outside of Reaper, is setting it as a region and then rendering, aka exporting it. That said, you can delay the rendering until later if you're proofing inside Reaper, although there are some good reasons to do it early even then, which I'm going to talk through later in this video. Creating a region for a chapter is easy, as I've set up a script to do it for you. First, select all the items that are going to go inside the region. Then click the button in the toolbox here, in the toolbar here. That one. That button automatically cuts the head of the chapter down to half a second and the tail of the chapter to 3 seconds, and then opens a window for you to name the region. And I'm going to come back to how you should name the chapter in a minute. The script works by finding the points where the audio starts, for the head, or ends, for the tail, which means it can fail if your noise floor is too high, if the head or tail isn't one single item, or if there's a loud enough tap or other noise to confuse the script. If it's caused by one of the latter two reasons, you'll probably only realise this has happened when you're having a closer-up view during proofing, at which point dragging the start or the end of the region to the right point is usually the quickest solution. If I zoom in here, you can just drag the end left and right. If it's the first reason, the noise floor being too high, then the script is consistently not going to do what it's meant to do, and in that case, you need to edit the script. So go to the action list and find the region maker eel script. This is a quicker version of the Lua script that does exactly the same thing. Click Edit and it will bring up the script. Find the line that gives the noise threshold for the start and the end of the chapter. Generally speaking, you might want to change this to -45 or -40 instead of 50. But if you're needing to change it to a higher number, then you should be going back and working out why your noise floor is so high, as it's going to be hard to meet the ACX requirements. Once you save that, you can run it with the button there, or just use the toolbar button. Now we can move on to how I name chapters. Unless I'm working with a publisher who requires me to follow a specific naming convention, I follow my own naming rules. I always name the opening credits 00 opening credits. I name each subsequent chapter one of the following things. If chapters are numbered but not named, I use 01 chapter 1, 02 chapter 2, etc. And if chapters are named but not numbered, I use 01 chapter name, 02 chapter name. And if they're numbered and named, I use 01 chapter 1, chapter name, 02 chapter 2, chapter name, etc. That also goes for if there's an interlude, prologue, or anything similar. So if it's a book with a prologue and a couple of interlude chapters, I will end up with a region called 45 chapter 40 chapter name. And then after the final chapter, I have the closing credits. So if that previous example of 45 chapter 40 chapter name was the last chapter, I'd then follow it with 46 closing credits. There's one additional region that needs to be created manually, the retail sample, and this can't be done using the script because you need to find the endpoint yourself. Our retail sample needs to start at the beginning of the first chapter after the opening credits and can run for up to 5 minutes. We also need to make sure the sample doesn't stop abruptly, and we have to choose a natural stopping point, which is why this can't be automated. So you do this by going to the 0 point, dragging to the right, and you'll see underneath you can see the length of the selection. So you just keep dragging. Let me zoom out a little. Keep dragging until you've got to the 5-minute point. And now go to that endpoint and listen to find a point that actually kind of makes sense at the end of a sentence.
Perhaps a brief intellectual discourse might resolve this discombobulation?
Zarok regarded Cal suspiciously.
No trickery, scholar barbarian. None whatsoever.
Cal smiled, eyes glinting. Then he swiftly punched Zarok squarely in the jaw. That's actually a pretty great way of finishing a sample. So, for this one, this is the time that I use the action list manually. Search for selection and region, or region and selection. I'm going to insert region from time selection and edit, run. And this is called 99 retail _ sample. I use number 9 because I have yet to have a number 99 chapter. If I did, I'd be switching to 3 digital numbers and be starting at 001 instead of 01, and I'd make the retail sample number 999, and the chapter reference, the voice reference, I start with 999, I would change that to 9999. The underscore in the retail sample is there because it is required for Second Opinion, which is an app I occasionally use to check ACX compliance, and it won't recognize the sample chapter unless it fits certain naming requirements, one of which is ending in underscore sample. So we'll name that. Just so you know, if you plan to use positron pickups later, it is important to follow this exact naming convention, because my script for bulk importing pickups only works if the chapters are named this way. If you're using a publisher's naming format, then they'll also be doing the proofing, so this shouldn't be an issue. Once we've set up our chapter as a properly formatted region, it's time to render it to a WAV or MP3. And to do that, we need to check the region render matrix, which is just here. If it's not there, you can get to it via the next screen. The region render matrix is a grid of checkboxes where we select which tracks should be included in each rendered region. So our retail sample is number 4. We'll take that. It's really important to use this because we need to tell Reaper which chapters we want to render, obviously, usually because we only want to render some of them, and because we also need to be telling Reaper to include the room tone track, not just the recording track. One of the most common mistakes people make is forgetting to tick the box in the correct row in the matrix. This can lead to missing audio in the final render, like having no room tone when the gate is active. That'll happen if you ended up ticking this line in the recordings thing. In one embarrassing case, quite recently actually, I ended up with only the room tone in a track. Not embarrassing because I gave it to anyone else, but because it took me a good 5 minutes to realise what I'd actually done. So in your region render matrix, you need to make sure that the top row, the master mix row, is ticked for each chapter you want to export. Then you're going to click this toolbar button at the bottom right of our custom toolbar to open the rendering window. And if you have not had the region render matrix open before, you can actually now get it to open by clicking region matrix here. These settings should appear right already, but if they don't, at the top left, you need to change the source to region render matrix via master. In the top right, change it to all project regions. Change the rendering folder location to just the word renders, and change the file name to $region or lowercase. What that means is the file name will be the region name. So if we scroll forward here, you can see it's going to appear inside the made-up book extract folder. We're creating a directory called renders, and the file name will be 99 retail_sample.mp3. Make sure the sample rate is set to 44,100, even if you've recorded in a different sample rate, and the box under it needs to be ticked saying Mix and Process FX at project sample rate. To the right of that, to the right and down rather, make sure that the normalization box is ticked and click on it. Set normalize to happen to RMSI minus 20 decibels. Normalize each file separately. Brick wall limit should be set at peak and -3. And if it is ticked, make sure that adjust monomedia an additional -3 decibels is not ticked. Otherwise, you're going to find everything gets knocked down by, everything gets adjusted by 3 decibels at the end. So then once you come back out of this window, click the X on Mac, set the target format to be MP3 at a 256 kbps bitrate, constant bitrate that is, and change quality from better, which is recommended, to maximum. Then click Save Settings. It's not visible for me here because I haven't actually changed anything, and you won't need to change any of that again. Finally, click Render. Now, it used to be that when you rendered multiple tracks in Reaper, each track would render and then normalize, then the next would render and then normalize, etc., meaning you had access to the first chapter file quite quickly. The current behavior at the time of writing this course is that all the tracks are rendered and then all the tracks are normalized. In the current pre-release versions, and I'm testing one of those, this behavior has gone back to the old version. And my understanding is that there'll be a release version soon which enables that as a possibility again. In the meantime, it's slightly frustrating. But as I said, you can get around it if you're willing to risk a pre-release version. Alternatively, I suspect that by the time anyone is viewing this video, the problem will have been solved. Rendering is not an amazingly fast process. I will demonstrate. My rendering chain renders somewhere between 4.2 and 5.2 times real time, depending on what is going on. And that will vary depending on your system. If you're using D-click rather than mouth D-click, I'm afraid that that's going to be a lot slower, possibly somewhere between real time 1 times and 2 times. If at all possible, especially if this is the end of your project and you're doing the very final render, post-edit and everything, and you're rendering every single chapter, I really recommend rendering overnight. Because it will take a very, very long time, especially if you're going sort of 1.5 speed for a 21-hour audio, but that's going to take 14 hours. You may sometimes see this happen at the end of your video. If that happens, it means that the limiter has taken effect in the rendering process instead. It's best if that doesn't happen. Now in this case, chapter 8 is absolutely fine. There's no extra limiting. So what we're going to do for chapter 7 is we're going to increase the smart limit up by 0.2. 0.1 would probably be enough, but 0.2 is going to be just that little bit safer. And then I only want to re-render number 7. Overwrite it. And there we are. We can let that run and render again. It'll take a couple of minutes. Finally, there's one trick I have learned recently which is improving my ability to detect pops that I might have missed in my proofing process, because I personally am much, much better at paying attention with my eyes than my ears. So let's just reopen the render window now that this is done. Hit close. As you can see, when I had my rendering, I had this ticked, add rendered items to new tracks in project. And what that did is it made the rendered file appear here. Now, if you play this at the same time, you're going to get very loud audio because you're playing the same thing twice. So drag this volume bit down to -infinite so it only plays once. That way, if you play anything back,
Such perspicacious accusations wound me.
it doesn't peak above 0. But you can now look at this waveform, and actually you can see really easily if any breaths have made it through. So
Witness.
you can see that breath there. It's quiet, but you can see it. Sometimes you might see a bigger one.
Yet mine.
A louder breath. And you can very quickly kind of get the hang of what a breath looks like and spotting if there's a too loud breath.
Well, nestled in
That is a too loud breath. I also have a number of extra steps that kind of automate breath detection, automate dropping the volume where there's a breath, things like that. You'll see them in the bonus video, but I'm not covering them in this course because they are significantly more complex behind the scenes, and they require a certain amount of manual fixing and editing to get them to work. This, incidentally, is the only thing I've ever missed about Audacity from switching to Reaper, and that is being able to see the final waveform and being able to kind of spot what's wrong with the audio. This completely solves that problem. So it's a really useful thing to be able to do. We will be coming back and looking at the editing process soon. But first up, there are 2 optional videos. One on using Positron, for those of you who haven't already got an account with them, and one which will also be relevant to those who already use Positron, on the most efficient method of transferring the exported pickup markers from Positron to Reaper. So I will see you again soon for those videos. Can't wait.